To be present, we must be intentional, and to bear fruit, we must feed the soul. You're listening to Pause, Sip, and Ponder. Hello Ponders, welcome back to another episode of Pause, Sip, and Ponder. How are you guys? We're so happy to be here, and I'm so excited for today's episode. Today I have my friend Naomi here with me, and today we're going to be talking about complacency and being too comfortable, or just comfort in general. But if you're new here, welcome. Pause, Sip, and Ponder is a podcast and a community where we talk about everything and anything in the aim to give you some encouragement, some inspiration to gain perspective from one another, to grow together. And yeah, we're just some incomplete people just figuring this whole thing out, which is life. And I think what's really beautiful about it is that we get to learn along the way together, and just have some really interesting and growth-filled conversations. So yeah, I'm so grateful to have my friend Naomi here today. It's crazy, we were talking earlier, so this is our first time like having a full-on conversation, having dinner together. We actually, I'll just introduce her a little bit of how we know each other. We grew up in the church together when we were kids, and then life happened, and I ended up moving, and we kind of lost connection after like 10 years. So there's a lot to catch up on. It seems like we're just leaving, coming back to where, things ended from before. And so I'm super grateful for you to be here. So for those who may not know about you, please share anything. Maybe it's certain hobbies that you enjoy, anything about you.
Ooh, girl.
It's like first date questions.
Yeah, no, for real. So I'm in school right now. I do serve at church. I do Sunday school full time. And I'm in school. I do online. So I'm at home a lot. It's definitely challenging for me. So I always like to go out on hikes, go out with friends, try to keep myself busy and distracted so I'm not too much stuck in a bubble. But currently I'm working as an RBT. So I work with autistic children, and I go in home and do therapy. And it wasn't until recently God has begin to show me my passion and my love for children. And so right now I'm at this place where I'm like, okay, we're just going to test the waters and see where he's going to lead me. And so that's my life right now.
No, that's great. Yeah, I think once you set yourself in an environment where you're surrounded by children, you'll never know what happens. Kids are crazy, and sometimes you can find a lot of healing through them. It's kind of like a reflection of who you were before. And I felt that too. I didn't know if I still wanted to work with kids, and then when I was in a setting with them, I was like, I could see myself doing this for a little bit. It's fun beats other jobs sometimes. And every day is different. I feel like you know what to expect, but also there's different things you can get out of it, positive things you can learn about yourself as well. So awesome. So today we're going to be talking about, like I said, comfortability and complacency, which is, I feel like, is an everyday thing, right? And something that we deal with as we go through life. And I think that there's so many things we could talk about. I actually had to write it down because it's such a big general topic. But I think I would love to hear your takes on it and your personal experiences. I did want to say this, and I planned on saying this to our community that has grown so much in person. For those who may be new to Pause, Sip, and Ponder, I'm always pretty open about my faith in general. This is not necessarily just a Christian podcast or community. Of course, we are here to open conversation with anyone from any background, any experience. It just so happened that a lot of my friends do come from some type of faith background, but a lot of it is deconstructed, and we all come from different experiences with that. And it just so happens that a lot of what we discuss has to do with Christian values and a lot of it and all the great things that we can learn from it. And, whether you're a Christian or not, or have a certain belief, I hope you stick around. I think I've learned a lot of people who may not have a faith-based background, but I think as a people, we can definitely gain some perspective, and topics like this on mental health, and comfortability and complacency and all of that. I think we can all have some type of common ground. So I hope you stick around. And I thank you to everyone who's been on the journey so far and has been reciprocating anything or has gained value so far. So yeah, let's get into it. All right. So when I was thinking about this, I made like a diagram because there's just so much to talk about. So comfortability, we'll start with that. Because I feel like there's two different types, or I don't know, maybe there's only one type, but when it is, I guess when we're in a state of comfortability where it's too much or where it's not adding necessarily value or growth in our life, I think that's another thing. So I just wrote this down, and I'll ask for your take on it too. So I said the first type is like, you're at peace and you're safe. We know being comfortable is when you're not anxious. You feel like, you don't have to put up a certain front. You feel secure, a sense of security, and yeah. And then another type of being in comfortability or being in comfort is to be in a place where it's not necessarily serving you. So you're so comfortable that you're not really moving anywhere. You're kind of like set and have limited yourself to just this idea or this way of living or this way of thinking. And so you're so comfortable that you kind of don't want to get out of that bubble. But what are your general thoughts on the idea of comfortability?
Well, in general, I think being...
let me fix this real quick. Sorry.
Sorry, Miss Girl. Yeah, I think in general, being comfortable isn't always a bad thing. I think sometimes we're such in a fast-paced environment, especially now that as like technology is progressing and we're like comparing, we're like, oh, we need to reach this goal and I need to be here. I'm already 20. I need to be at this point in my life. And so comfortability, I think it is necessary in your life, just taking that place of rest and just being able to enjoy where you are and like, okay, like I'm able to just sit and like, okay, enjoy where I am and just to just bask in it, to be honest. But there is a certain point where you shouldn't be stuck there. And I guess that's where complacency comes in, where you get stuck and you get comfortable to the point where it's like you said, it's not serving you anymore. And so it's hard to like enjoy it because personally I'm a person that's go.
Same.
Check off the list. Yes. I'm like a to-do list type girl. And so like it's hard for me just to sit and be like, maybe like no list, like just take it day by day and just to be comfortable in where God has placed me and just like allowing him to move rather than me trying to reach my next goal. And so it's definitely like a slippery slope because if you go in one extreme, you don't grow, and you go to the other extreme, you're not allowing yourself to grow to the capacity you are. Because I was reading this book about creativity, and it was explaining like when you read the Bible, the first thing you learn about God is that he's a creator. And if we're made in his image, we're meant to be creative. That's why we're all like creative minds and stuff. And so to be creative, he still rested on the seventh day. And we're like, oh no, like I can't, like I need to do this, and so like,
wow,
you need to like learn just to rest, because if you don't rest, your creative mind doesn't have the capacity in which it could fully work, because you're so strained out, you're pulling yourself so far where you can't do your best and give your best.
Wow, that's so good. Very well said. Actually, before we move on into the topic, I feel like this is a great opportunity for me to learn more about you too, since time has passed. And for those who are familiar with, just the word testimony and just our life and where it's become and how God has really changed our life. What was that for you? If you could share a snippet or how much you feel comfortable to share of how you kind of had that personal connection with God and how it changed your life. Because we grew up in the church, right? Yeah. But didn't it come into a certain moment, a certain age in our life where we actually had a personal connection with him?
Oh. Okay, we're gonna shorten it up.
Sure.
Like, if you read the cover of my page,
Yeah.
the back page.
Yeah.
Basically, yeah, we grew up in the church. My family was pretty strong. At least my dad was a strong example of what it means to be a man of God. But growing up, my parents split. There's issues, of course. You go through your teenage years, and you're always like angry. You want to be out and do all these things. I moved out of my mom's when I was 16. I was with my dad, and my dad's very lenient. He knows how to discipline, but it's easy for me to get away with stuff with him than my dad. And so, I mean, with my dad than with my mom. And so I was really like rebellious. I was doing a lot of drugs. I was sleeping around. I was with the wrong crowd. I was like, I was a bad influence. It was like nothing I should boast about, but just to put in perspective of who I was. And then eventually I was experiencing a lot of abuse, physical, verbal, sexual, emotional abuse, and I was just running away. And it wasn't until God began to remove a lot of things I depended on or begin to disrupt my life. He took away what I was comfortable with.
Yes, that's why I asked,
He
girl.
took away what I was comfortable with and
Yes.
began to just like, who are you going to lean on now? And I'm hard-headed, so it was that tough love with me, because I'm definitely the type, like, you could take it away, but I'm still going to do what I'm going to do. You could do this, and I'm still going to do what I'm going to do. And like, he stripped me bare. Like, I was literally raw. I was like, oh, I thought I hit rock bottom. No, he like maybe hit it like 10 times down. And basically, out of his grace and his love, I went to California with my grandma, because her sister passed away. My grandma on my mom's side passed away. There was a lot of death in the family, so I felt that heaviness already. And he already began to move some things and remove some things. So when we went to California, I actually got in an argument with my grandma, and I was mad because I couldn't get high. Like, I freaked out. Like, I was like, I need to smoke. If you don't give me a joint right now, I'm going to scream my head off. And it got so bad, I literally, like, left. And I left and went on a walk. And I never, like, not to say I didn't feel the conviction of the Holy Spirit, but I haven't felt his presence in so long. He convicted me. And so I came back, I apologized to my grandma, and the next day went to a museum. And Filipinos they take long, and so we don't have a car. We're just sitting at the museum waiting to get picked up. And we're sitting in front of this pond, and like, I ask her some things, and she begins to share her testimony with me and all these things. And while she was sharing it, I could see my own life in it. And like, since then, like, God just began to move. I was like, okay, if it worked with her, like, and she's like worse than me, like, I'm gonna try. So like, me just saying like a partial yes, he began to just like do the miraculous. And then like, eventually, like, I'm here where I am now. It wasn't easy, because I'm very, very hard-headed.
Sure.
Very hard-headed, but it required him like taking a lot of what I was dependent on, so that I had nowhere else to lean but onto him. And he was there. Like, he began to show me like he was there throughout it all. It's just he was waiting for me to like, okay, give me your yes.
Wow.
So yeah,
that's beautiful. And it's crazy how, like, you mentioned how you're hard-headed, and sometimes it takes a matter of someone who is hard-headed to ask a question or to get out of your comfort zone and talk to someone else. And sometimes it really be someone else's story that really blesses and changes our life. And that is the weight, that is the great and beautiful thing about testimonies. And basically, anyone who may not really necessarily know what that means, or at least for a Christian, is basically the story that God reveals to you, and that moment that you witness and you really experience God to the fullest in a personal connection. Because we can learn things from a sermon, from a preaching, whether you grew up in the church, but it changes completely when it's something personal to you. And a testimony is basically involving everything that happened in your past, and how, rather it just being an event that happened in your life, it's something, a part of your story that can be used to share about the goodness of God and how it's really transformed you, and how it's turned, I always say that God turned my mess into a message, and how he can transform that, and I truly believe that everyone has a purpose, and it's if you're willing and you're open, you get to discover, and it's a beautiful journey, and a hard one too, a difficult one. Don't assume that life is easy when you're following God, but it's definitely a journey worth following and digging deep into. And so that's awesome. Thank you for sharing that. I do want to kind of go back to when you talked about when you found yourself, before, having, I guess, that transformative moment with your grandma, how you were in, I guess, habitual habits, things that may be weighing you down. And you said you were so comfortable and taking in verbal and sexual and all of this abuse. And that does have, being too comfortable. I want to talk about how it's such a real thing that we aren't willing to change because we are so comfortable with a certain idea. We're so used to people speaking to us in a certain way that may have harmed us before, but that's the only thing that we know. And we have no way of knowing what it's not like, because it's very hard to get out of this situation. So what was that like for you, comparing to your life before and to now, and how you've kind of navigated that? Because I know it takes a while, but...
Oh, yeah. It's definitely not an overnight process.
Yeah.
Some people, you'll look at people and like, how did they change? Girl, it was a lot behind the scenes.
Yeah.
So my life then to now.
Yeah. Yeah. Like, what was there a certain moment that kind of pushed to be like, okay, no, I'm not gonna take this any longer, and but that requires us to get out of ourselves and what we know of our life and what we were so comfortable with.
Yeah, it was definitely learning my identity in Christ and not in myself. And it's kind of a hard concept to grasp, but when you build your identity on yourself, you're self-serving, you're self-sufficient, you hurt other people, and because you're hurting other people, you're like, oh, I don't like myself.
Wow.
And so I began to take my eyes, this is something I'm learning right now, so it's very hard to me like process, but I guess since I'm learning it, it's easier for me to explain. But like taking my eyes off of myself and putting it onto God, because like knowing his ways, you go through things and you don't understand why you're going through them, but at the end of the day, he's used everything for his glory and for your good, right? And so because he loves you, it's just like he wants everything to like work for the masses. So like the reason I went through certain things was to serve other people. But instead of me, like before, I used to self-pity, and I used to be like, why am I going through this? Why am I this type of person? Why am I so horrible? Or why do I have to go through it? But then when I fixed my eyes on him, I was like, oh, I'm seeing why I went through it, so I can help people who are going through it, who don't have that type of perspective.
Okay. All right. So we got cut off a little bit, so I'm not sure where we left off, but it's fine. I think it'll be good for the next question. If you could share what resulted in being too comfortable, if you can share any moment or experience that you've had where you felt you found yourself like, oh, I'm too comfortable and it's led me to this.
When you realize you're too comfortable. Oh. You get humbled.
Ooh.
I don't know how, but like there will be a situation, like it's so many different like situations where like God knows how to work.
Yeah, he's like, hey, don't be too comfortable.
No, like literally, like even recently. So like this week's been a lot, like spiritually, because he's been pointing it out. But I remember I was like, oh, I'm good. Like I'm gonna get back into it, like waking up early and like prioritizing my time. And literally, like he told me, he was like, just pray. And I was like, I need to do something real quick. Yeah. Literally like 15 minutes later, like someone called me and she really needed help. And I was like, only if I just prepared myself. But like in the grace of God, like it worked out, but it was just like that conviction was so quick. He was like, I told you, just 5 minutes. Like that's all I wanted. Or like stuff like that. It's just so
that
like
just 5 minutes is so real. I'm like,
yeah, it's just you got so 5. He was like, you got 5 minutes, and like, so
really?
But I'm just like, no, like let me just do this real quick. Like I'm gonna forget. And he's like, bro, you got a sticky note. Like what more do you need? But like, yeah, it's just stuff like that where he knows like he'll call you somewhere, or like you'll be in a situation, and then when you're faced with that, you're like, dang, I really should have prepared myself for this.
Wow.
Like I had the time, like I knew I should have, but I kept delaying it because I wanted to feed my own schedule and like prioritize myself rather than others. Because like he like puts you in situations, like he wants you to grow to serve the bigger, like the better people, like for the masses, right? And so when you're so focused on yourself, it's just like when it hits you, when someone's coming to you for help or someone's like asking you for advice, and you're just like, and then you get brought back to that moment where like, oh, that's why you told me to do this but I didn't.
Wow.
And stuff like that. And so it's like humbling you again and again and again until you're just like, okay, like I learned my lesson, basically.
Yes. And it's
So-
crazy how he does it too, because you could be praying for something, right? Like a certain blessing, and it happens, and we can find ourselves too comfortable in that blessing.
Yes.
And then we forget where it even came
Yup.
from. You feel like, you got it all taken, you have it all managed, and you have everything in control, and that things are smooth sailing. But I always remember, if nothing's happening, if there's no trial or hiccup, something's gonna happen.
Yeah.
Something's wrong, or maybe like you've lost touch. And that's one of my biggest fears, is not have that conviction, or to not feel the spirit, and being sensitive to it, because just because we receive something that we've been praying for, that doesn't necessarily give us the right to just leave suddenly and take it. And and yeah, I love when you said that you wish that you had prepared yourself for this certain thing. And I think that's the whole thing about depending on him
Yeah.
every day. Like he's like, well, you never asked me for help. Or it's
Yeah.
like, you took on that job but you never asked me if this
Yeah.
was the one for you. You never asked if this guy was for you. And then we're here like sad,
Yeah.
sobbing, and questioning why. And it's because we get too comfortable in our own way of thinking, and in our self-reliance, and our thinking is so limited. And one thing that the Lord that has really been kind of working in me is that he's saying, do not limit me. Even if we read the Bible every day,
Oh, girl.
or even if we think we're one of the wisest people, we've been through
Yeah.
stuff, still we do not know the vastness of how great God is, and how mysterious he is. And even in just things like forgiveness, or even in our careers, or even in whatever it is, we will never have a full grasp of anything. And yeah, so that's what he's been working, like just the idea of like forgiveness. Like I had a certain way of thinking of how it is, and I would read about it and blah blah blah, but the way that the Lord teaches you things is through experience, and through heartbreak, and through disappointment, and through experience. And that requires us to leave our comfort zone, and fully rely on him to teach us throughout the way. So
Oh, one thing I would
Yeah.
like to add, when you said what did you even say? It just left my brain. It was about just letting God move and not trying to take control. And when you're talking about that, I was like, literally like what God's been teaching you. He like revealed it to me like the few nights ago. And you know that song, that worship song is like Make Room. And it's like, I'm gonna make room
I
for you.
love that song.
And like I remember like I was like, oh, this is my song, but like
Oh,
he began to
gosh.
like break it down, and it was like, it's basically like, oh, I'll make room for you to do whatever you want to. And it's like shake up the ground of all my tradition, all my religion, and that his way is better. And so like he was showing me, he's like, if you want to make room for me, one, you have to be intentional, and two, to do whatever he wants. That's not 1 hour in the morning. That's not just one like time snippet within your day. He's like, you need to be mindful of me throughout your whole day. And it's not like doing religious works and doing these like, oh, I gotta read my Bible every morning, I gotta do this every morning. It's like just fellowship, because it's like all he wants is intimacy with you. Like it's as simple as just like turning off the music in the car and just to pray to him, just to like talk, like conversate with the Holy Spirit while you're driving. Like it's not something like I need to sit down and like
Pray
do my
for
like
3
I'm
hours.
holier than thou and like do all these
Yeah.
things. Like sometimes he's like, yo, just chill. Or like even in conversations, like I've been like asking God to help me like tame my tongue, and like I hear him just like, just let them speak, or just listen, like because I'm building that intimacy and that fellowship, just him just like changing me. Like I can't change myself, I wouldn't be mindful of these things. And so it's small things like that where I'm beginning to see like I'm praying for change and he does it for me. or he reminds me, or he redirects me when I do fall short. And it's all out of love. Like, it's never
Yes.
anything where he's like, oh, well, I'm not going to talk to you for 2 days.
For sure.
It's
Yeah.
definitely like, he's like, I'm with you. Like, girl, like, just
Yeah,
chill.
so much
So,
grace.
yeah.
Yeah, wow. Yeah, and I think it's always his grace that breaks me down, breaks my comfortability. Because
Mm-hmm.
it's like when we are too comfortable, we feel as if, oh, well, the Lord's gonna forgive me anyways, or like,
Mm-hmm.
like it's fine, right? And we can have the tendency to think that way. But if we truly are able to grasp his grace of what that even means upon our life, like
Mm-hmm.
we'll never want to live our everyday life without him anymore. Like we just are fully relying on him because it's like I'm here because of that, and so wow, that's so good. All right, so we're gonna transition to this next one, which is we kind of touched base on it already, but I think there's a lot of things we could speak on, which is complacency, which I was actually more I was interested when you brought that up, and why did that topic specifically speak to you when we were kind of discussing what we should talk about next.
Mm-hmm.
But how does that complacency relate to whatever you've experienced in your life?
I think it's something he's been teaching me recently.
Mm.
And it was funny because when you texted me, I was on like Facebook Reels. Yo, it was like the video was literally about that, and it like
Oh,
rebuked me.
wow.
And then I saw your text. I was like, oh, now I know what to
Yeah.
write. Like I was like, it was like the timing. I was like, oh, that's so odd. But it's definitely something he's been teaching me recently. I think I've gotten to a point in my faith where I'm like, first, like I got like radically, I guess, born again. I'm on fire for God and doing all these things. Then eventually, I grew stagnant. And I was just like, oh, I'm good where I am. Like, like I've gotten further than a lot of like older people. Like, I'm good. But then he's just like keeps showing me like, you're right here and I want you here. Like, you can't just go like that. Like, I'll choose someone else. But like, I want you to grow. And so, again, like a series of events going on. But I think like because he allowed certain things to happen, it was really to like reveal like the consequences of not growing with God, because eventually old habits were coming back, or old like temptations where I was like, oh, well, I wasn't struggling with this last year. Why am I struggling with it again? I thought I was free. And it's like, you are free, but you're not getting yourself right with God. So you're more easily deceived and more easily tempted because you're not on guard. You're just living how you want. Like, yeah, you're saved and you're doing good things, but like, is your heart right? Because, like, again, you look in the Bible, like, these people, they're making sacrifices, but their hearts weren't right before God. So he was like, what's the point? Like, that's why he sent Christ. Like, he's like, you're doing these sacrifices, but your heart's not right. Like, that's why Christ came down to live as a sacrifice. So all we have to do is have faith, and then he changes us. And so it was definitely something I'm still learning and still, like, not trying to shake out of, but, like, asking God, I'm like, okay, so how do I overcome this in your timing and in your ways? Yeah.
I actually had to search the word complacency because I don't find myself using it ever, but maybe I've done it or I've experienced it. So for those who don't know, like I didn't, complacency is a feeling of a smug or uncritical satisfaction with oneself or one's achievements. So are you saying that basically you didn't feel as if you were doing enough, or that you weren't enough, or that you were comfortable with just where you thought you were?
He challenged me where I was like, okay, I'm not doing enough. And so it's like being smug in your own achievements. That's the thing. So I was being too comfortable in my own achievements and being challenged by that, rather than like, okay, so what's God doing? Because I was focusing more on yourself. And it comes from a lot of pride too, just like thinking like, oh, well, I did this, I brought myself here, I did this, and all these things. But like, is your heart changed, or is just outwardly you look better or you seem better? You know what I mean? Because like sometimes we get so caught up in like looking at the past, and I was like, well, I look so happy, and I was like, yeah, outwardly you were, but like deep down you're still like really depressed or dealing with these things. And so yeah, it was a lot of that, because he was exposing my heart. Like outwardly it was like, oh, I'm serving and I'm doing all these things, and I'm evangelizing, but like my heart was so prideful It was so prideful, and it was like I was putting on a facade, even though I told myself I wasn't. So, yeah.
Well, thank you for sharing that,
Yeah.
being vulnerable and honest about that, because it is real and it's experience that we go through, especially if you're so heavily in the ministry and you think that everything's okay. But it's really in that, I always say that you experience God the most when you're the most broken, the most sad, crying the most, because he desires to come to him broken. I think sometimes we feel as if we have to come to him as this perfect vessel and offering, and all he desires is to meet us where we are, and to allow him to move. Because if we always think that we have to be a certain way, and which is what back then, that's what they thought they had to do in the Old Testament. They had to present themselves a certain way. They couldn't do this at a certain time, and blah 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 blah. But that completely erases or blurs the whole reason of God's grace and what he has already done for us. And we don't have to approach him in a certain way where we feel like we're not worthy. And he loves us to the fullest extent, no matter where we are in our faith. He just desires to connect with us and just to hear us and have him move. I really resonate with complacency, and how there was a point in my life where I was just like, okay, my life cannot just be this. There's no way. And I feel like I've always lived like that, but there were moments where I would define my life to my circumstances, to my limitations, to my past, to my trauma. And where sometimes you could be like, yeah, you just leave it at that, and it prevents you from actually reaching your full potential and reaching where God really wants to put you and place you. And we begin to live a life of complacency and you go through laziness, you go through making excuses every day. And, but one thing I'm really grateful for is that and I'm learning this as I get older, like I've always been given or seen visions. Like, I don't know, like it would either be through a dream or it would be through just me at a cafe and I just see something and you see me zone out and I just see where God wanted me to be in snippets in the future. And I held on to that, but it had to involve me getting out of my comfort zone and taking those steps of waking up early, or, letting go of certain people. It can be so easy for us to complain about life and be like, oh, why am I not there yet? Why am I not here yet? Like my friends, like the people I see online. And one, it's not real. Everyone is going through their own thing behind, closed doors in the camera. But it can be so easy for us to be comfortable with complaining. But change doesn't happen until there's an action about it. Like I can hear about, and I take pride in this because it's just, I've said no many times because I knew there was so much more to my life. And it's about showing up in consistency and doing things that you're not comfortable with, and saying and talking to people that you don't feel comfortable with, starting conversations that you may have never learned in your upbringing. And it's just a lot of breaking barriers to get out of that spirit of complacency. So yeah. Is there anything else relating to complacency that you wanted to bring up, or anything in general you feel led to talk about?
Yeah, when you talked about complaining, it's definitely easy. It feels like it's easier to complain than to like put the work in. And so like when you like complain about your circumstances, sometimes it's easy to put the blame on other people, or blame on your childhood, or blame on your job and all these things. And it comes to a point where God's like, you can only control yourself.
Yes.
Like you can only focus on yourself. You can only like work on yourself, and at least like make an effort to. And like what you said, like just being consistent, being willing, not like giving up after like, oh, I don't see a change. Girl, it's been 2 weeks. Like, what you mean? Like, just keep trying and like keep pursuing like what like is gonna work out in the end. And I think that's the biggest problem with a lot of people, nowadays, because like we want a quick fix, like whether it comes like working out, dieting, or like getting all these followers. It's just like so easy to be like, oh, I just want a quick fix. But God's about seasons, right?
Wow,
And so
yes.
like I was talking about this earlier, and I was like, there's like a lot of verses and a lot of like analogies about seasons in the Bible, and it's just like, there's a winter, and then it's like it's all sad and depressing and you're indoor, and then there's the spring comes and the sun comes, but like it's raining, but you know, like the plants need the rain so you could gather a harvest. And then the summer comes, it's like nourishing the plants, and as soon as it's fall, it's harvest time, and you're like, oh, I love the fall. And
Yes.
so like when you like look at life, it's just like you need to look at it in seasons. Like you don't get a seed to a tree overnight. It takes cultivating, it takes the right environment, it takes watering the plant, making sure it gets sunlight, making sure there's no pests on it, and just like, but at the same time, you need to trust, like, you can't make it grow.
Wow.
God makes it grow.
Wow.
And
Yes.
so like recently, or it's not even recently, I've been saying this to myself a lot, like, God, like, help me plant seeds only you can grow, because it keeps me humble, but then it also keeps me motivated to like, okay, it's not going to go in vain. Like eventually fruit will be bared. It's just not going to be when I see it, when I expect it, when I want it. But at the end of the day, there will be a tree and there will be a harvest. And so yeah.
So yes, I feel like I was just thinking about the other day. I was like, I say seasons too much, but it's so
It's
true.
true. Like, girl, it will pass.
Yes, this too shall pass. It's so true, and I'd love to see my life as that. And I feel like right now I'm in a season of transition and being pushed, like, to jump to the I don't know. There's just a lot of like depictions of like rivers and jumping over and going to the next, and stepping onto something new, and I'm not gonna lie, guys, it's a little scary, especially, oh my gosh, dude, I was gonna say this to you, how when God tells you this is going to happen and it hasn't happened yet, like I feel like I'm in this I'm
Like the impatience we chat.
I'm definitely in the Abraham Sarah story right now, where at their old age, they are told that they're going to have a son. They're like 90 plus years old, and the crazy and interesting thing about it is that God never tells them at what age. He just says you're going to have a son. And to me, like me, oh my gosh, I'm like, oh no, like what can I do? Like what I'm gonna do in this time of waiting? Like there's only so much I can do. And what did Sarai, at the time her name was Sarai, what did she do? She handed over their servant to Abraham to conceive a child with with the servant, because she felt as if she needed to assist God, because he said he would do something, but it's taking too long according to her. And I think sometimes we can do that and feel like we should assist God, and we try to make, take things into our own hands or try to speed up the process. And the Lord is just telling me just to be still and to be in his stillness, to stand still. And that I read in my devotions how it's like sometimes we don't have to go left or right.
Yep.
Like sometimes we just gotta
Just sit.
just sit there, which is something that, someone who had experiences in the past where I could not control a lot. There's a lot of things out of my control. So what did that lead me to? That led me to be someone who felt like she needed to have a sense of control, whether that's changing her room every month or changing her nails and her hair every month, or and at the time it was art, like I was able to control what was on my canvas, stuff like that. And that stuff follows you until your adulthood, but that is just how the Lord continues to work. But wow. What season are you in before we close out?
It's like the exact same.
Really?
That is crazy.
Wow.
Yeah, he's been showing me the story of Abraham and Sarah too.
Really? That's
Yes, when you said that, I was like,
crazy.
oof. I was like, oh, I'm not alone. But
Yes.
yeah, just learning, stop taking control. He's been like literally like, just be still and know that I'm God. Just be still and know that I'm God. And just like stop taking it's even the smallest things. I was like talking about it last night to my sister. I was like, yeah, God's been pointing out like I do like weird things, and it's in me able trying to cope and try to take control of the situation, and I just trying to like just to surrender, just to like take a step back and be like, okay, God, like have your way. Like I'm just gonna stop overthinking. I'm gonna stop trying to get from point A to point B. And you've
we
given
stress ourselves.
yes, and it's like he's giving you the promise. It's just like
Yes.
when you look at the life of Abraham, it's like all he did was have faith.
Yeah.
And it's just like sometimes it's so hard just to like, okay, you give me the promise, but like what next? And he's like, there's no what next. Like I've given you the promise, and then like look at this story. Like what did he do? He just had faith, and he said about this time next year you'll conceive a child, and like the word came to pass. And so like I've been learning just to like literally just let go. It's so corny. Everyone like let go, let God, girl. Yeah, literally let go and let God. Like
Pinterest, yeah.
at this point, yeah.
It's
So
true, though.
I'm just learning, just focus on the present. Like just
Yes.
what has He placed in front of you right now,
Yes.
and just work at it with all of your heart. Because
Yeah.
it'll be right. It'll be on your lap before you even know it.
Oh my gosh.
So
Yeah. And an interesting thing is that we may again we may be praying for a certain answered prayer, right? But really it's the process that we actually need and God desires to teach, right? Like for example, we want a degree, right, in our career, but it's really what happens in between that really makes you who you are and who you become. It's the process. Just like, the Lord can give you a bike, but it comes in parts. So you really gotta, maybe he's trying to teach you patience or, and just to have faith in it and to turn to him for direction, or whatever that may be. There's always something that you can learn right now. And some, like you said before, like we're just overstimulated all the time and we feel like we need things now. And everything has to be instant. But, with God, what is it? A day is like a thousand years, and a thousand years can be like a day. And it's so true. Because it feels like I'm still 17, but there are days where I'm like, oh my gosh, my life is like it's happening so slow. But there's something to learn, there's something to grasp, there's something that we can also share with other people. And I think that's a beautiful thing about just going through life not alone, one with, a good community and with the Lord, is that you're able to share your experiences with other people and to really remember that, we're not alone and that we're all figuring it out. And it is beautiful, if we are able to look at it in hindsight, and so I would have never known that, the story of Sarah and Abraham was on you as well if I didn't bring it up. And so it's just amazing how God connects us through just real life, and one thing I'll also add before we end, but I heard something in a podcast. For me personally, like I feel like for someone who grew up in church and in the ministry, I like when it comes to mental health or like emotions, it's so easy for me to be like an emotional stuffer. So like it won't break me till later. Like something will happen, I'll be like, oh, the Lord will take care of that, whatever. And then sooner or later it's too late, and then it strikes me, and then I'm just like bawling and it just hurts me right at the end. And one thing that's really been assuring to me has been like, well, God was emotional too, and so whatever you guys are going through or experiencing, grasp every emotion, like take hold of where you're at right now and be mindful and intentional and just embrace it. Because, it's not just the Lord doesn't just meet you when you're happy. He meets you when he can meet you when you're angry, when you're depressed, when you are confused, when things are uncertain. He is the one who has gifted us these things of emotions and feelings. And I think just the world and just its chaos and its brokenness has perverted it in a way where it feels as if we can't come to God when we're broken or when we feel like we're not enough or we're unworthy. He can meet us there too. And so all right, guys. So we're coming to the close for this episode. I want to say thank you, Naomi, for everything. Thank you for being here. I personally want to say thank you, and not even just for the camera, of how you have no idea how much of an impact you have made in my personal life, even if we don't see each other every day. I will say that I won't share everything about, the things that are moments that we had, these past months. But one thing I do appreciate is how your willingness to pray for people. And you have no idea the day that we saw each other for the first time in a while, how you just asked, like, there was so much going on, and what it is. I'm not going to share it like in detail with everyone because it's so sacred to me, but so much was going on, and a lot of great things, right? But the only thing I needed, but no one knew, was that I needed prayer. And so I'm just so grateful for you for planting that seed of faith once again in me, and just this vision for Pod Sip and Ponder. She's like definitely one of the people that you don't see, but she's behind closed doors, but she's definitely been a big impact in my life these past months. So I'm so grateful. I'm so proud of you for how far you've come. Oh my God, there's still so much to catch up upon. And I'm just so excited to see where 2024 will lead you, where God will lead you. I'm just declaring like abundance, and I know the Lord is working mightily in your life, and also in the people in your life. So I knew you were gonna say that. Yeah. But is there anything you want to share with anyone, with our audience? Any last minute, I guess, encouragement or?
Just keep holding on. Like something I've been like telling myself again and again. It's like, I need to read it. I can't even. Girl, we gonna pull it out. It's worth it. But you gotta come here.
Time. We can always edit.
Okay, so 2 Corinthians 4:16-18, and it just says, "Therefore we don't lose heart. Though outwardly we're wasting away, yet inwardly we're being renewed day by day. For our light and momentary troubles are achieving for us an eternal glory that far outweighs them all. So we fix our eyes not on what is seen, but what is unseen, because what is seen is temporary, and what is unseen is eternal." So like when you face these problems and you face hardships and you're facing a lot of brokenness and things that you don't want to deal with, it's like there's a bigger plan to it all. It's not always going to be like this. And like we were mentioning earlier, like life is in seasons. It's like, yeah, this will pass, but not only will it pass, you'll reap a harvest from it. And so like when you turn onto him, he will turn things that you didn't think could be redeemed and redeem them for his glory, but not only for his glory, but for your good. And so like if you learn anything from this, like literally just don't lose heart. Keep going, keep pushing. Like it's gonna be worth it. So yeah,
beautiful. Thank you so much, Naomi, again for being here. Thank you guys for listening. If you've made it this far, I hope you were encouraged by it, just like I was. I'm just as much as a participant as you guys on this. It's truly such an honor to be able to have this platform, to have my friends on here. I always look forward to these, even if I'm tired after work and we're all here coming back from work. It's so needed, I think. These type of conversations in the middle of the week. Because life does get busy, and we do get comfortable in the day-to-day, and I think it's very important that we take moments with community, with others, and just learn from one another. And that's where we can really learn that life is just not what we see on social media. It's not just what we see on the surface. I always say that life is meaningful when you give it meaning. Everyone can have the same experiences and the same trials, but when you give it meaning, it's a whole different story. So thank you guys once again. If you've gained value from this episode, or just Pod Sip and Ponder in general, please do consider subscribing and following us on our journey on our social medias. If you're in the DMV area, please connect. We'd love to meet you. You can learn more about that on the links below, and we've been doing a lot. We have a lot planned for this year, but of course we can't do it without your support. So if you feel generous and kind, and if you've had the experience of being on the podcast, or have heard what we've done, or have been a part of our events, please do consider being a monthly donor. This really contributes to all the future things that we want to do, in really dedicating time to help help the young adults in our area, whether it be financial literacy in the future or just creating opportunities and spaces for us to grow together, to learn from one another, just to have a mindful moment in these busy times. But yeah, that's it. I don't think that there's anything else I need to bring up. Stay tuned for the next episode, and we'll see you in the next one. Don't forget to always love, to always be curious, and to always ponder. Yeah. Bye, guys.
Bye.